Welcome to the story behind the story, where we are diving into the book The Millennial, Pastor Rich Wilkerson's first novel. Now, we have Pastor Rich here with us, and he's actually going to be reading an excerpt from the book, so stick around to the end. And Dad, we've had the opportunity to talk about this book in a few of our other episodes, and we've talked about how the themes of faith and of legacy, of prayer, are woven throughout this prophetic novel. But he chose to put a photo of a guy smoking a cigar, drinking a margarita at the beach, having a good time. Why? What's happening here? There's got to be more.
Well, he comes from a life of spiritual legacy. His father, who is Raphael Jr., kind of gets off. He comes back to Christ, but he gets off. He goes way off. He's a multi-billionaire. This boy, consequently, is raised in somewhat of a godless family. And so he just becomes wild. I mean, I guess he's a modern day prodigal son in many ways. But his dad wasn't really living the way he should have been living. So it helped to get him off. And he's just wild. I mean, just immoral, always drunk, always on some kind of drug, wealthy beyond description. Just crazy wealth. And he has a St. Paul experience. It starts with the first Christian woman that is as intelligent as he is and is as popular in the tech world as he is. And she's a godly woman and he's attracted and she wants nothing to do with him. And that's an amazing story. And that is what gets his attention. And in time, he has an encounter with Jesus Christ in his own house.
Wow. So really there is this conversion moment. Yeah. This encounter with God. And honestly, I think
I'm going to tell you, son, I wrote this thing 4 years ago. I've edited. I cannot read the conversion without personally crying.
Wow.
I mean, I'm just telling you, it's a game changer.
Wow, it's so powerful. And I know that there's so many people watching right now who have friends, family members, daughters, and sons who that's what they're praying for. They're praying for them to come home to Jesus. And that's why I think the book's super encouraging. Man, I'm excited to hear the excerpt that you're about to read. But I want to encourage you, if you're watching, to head on over to Amazon, go to Audible, where you can pick up an audio version of the book. It's super encouraging. But stay tuned for this excerpt from The Millennial.
Thank you, dear Taylor. Rich Wilkerson again here. And this is the fourth and last reading that I'm going to do. But really, I must tell you that it's quite a unique book. I encourage you to get, I really do. Tres Salvador, who is Raphael III and the great grandson of Julio Salvador, is the millennial in this book. And he has a St. Paul kind of conversion. You'll read about it when you get the book or listen to it on Audible. And he's so changed. In fact, when you hear the conversion, when he meets Jesus in his living room, I've probably read it 100 times. I cry every time. But Trace is changed by the power of God. And God uses him around the world. Zoom calls, and thousands are on Zoom calls, and they're accepting Christ. And towards the very end of the book, he's called to Myanmar by the king, whose son is very ill at the point of death. And so great things happen in that event. In fact, the millennial ends up being used of the Lord to raise the king's dead little boy back to life. And it spreads all over Myanmar immediately. The problem is he has to get back on the plane and rush back to America to meet with his cousin in Washington, D.C., who's the president of the United States. This is totally a Spanish family's kind of takeover of the U.S. It's an amazing story. And yet, before he can get on the plane, the king of Myanmar says, I need you to do one more thing. That's what I want to read to you right now. Mr. Salvador, please, I ask you to stay just a little longer. I'm afraid your flight has been canceled due to the celebration. If you could do me one more favor, I would be happy to offer you transport home on my personal jet. Of course, sir. What can I do for you? My people heard you, the millennial, would be arriving in Myanmar. They want to hear from you. He saw Trace's mouth open in refusal and hurried on. Please, the stadium is already full of people, as are the streets. We've set up screens so that all can watch. I've reserved a helicopter. It will land right next to the stage and fly you out of the stadium as soon as you finish speaking. Please. Trace tightened his jaw and nodded. Before he knew it, he stood on a stage preparing to speak to hundreds of thousands of people. He stepped up to the microphone and silence fell. I've just come from the palace. Many of you know that President Ong's son was raised from the dead while I was there. I want you to know that Jesus did that miracle, not me. I don't usually speak in front of crowds as large as this, and I struggled with what I might share. As I prayed, God gave me one word to share with you: Maranatha. I'm going to explain that word to you, and when I do, I want you to grab onto that word with both hands and hold it close to your heart. He took a deep breath, and the silence held. Maranatha means, "Come, our Lord." It's an invitation. Maranatha is what the early Christians would say while they waited for the Lord's return. I want you to shout Maranatha and ask Jesus to come into your heart. As he spoke, he started to hear people shout in praise. People were being healed all over the stadium, and cries of Maranatha filled the air. Trace quietly left the stage and climbed into the waiting helicopter, which flew him back to the airport. He could still hear the chant as he boarded the president's plane. Maranatha, Maranatha, Maranatha.